something that was theoretical. There have been a lot of conversations on the Outreach Collective about folks asking for solutions, feedback on what everyone thinks of existing solutions, what are their recommendations on which guidance platform to go in for, and general questions around it's not just about what's better, but really understanding what's out there and what's a good fit. So the conversation today is really going to focus on the nuances of understanding that technology is no longer just optional. We all know that, but choosing the right one still somehow feels like guesswork to not just school counselors who are making large institutional decisions, but also to independent counselors who use technology for working with their students. Now, there's no shortage of tools, career planning platforms or college databases, workflow dashboards, AI bots. But if you've ever found yourself stuck between features and flashy demos, you're not alone, counselors. So the session isn't really about selling you one platform, or this is not an advertising platform for any of the four companies represented here today. It's simply really to bring in the biggest names in the space right now globally that are definitely more relevant to Indian high schools or high schools and counselors in the subcontinent. And that's why the pick of these four could not have been better. So today we're going to move beyond product comparisons and we're going to explore slightly deeper but also realistic questions. One, what actually fits your context, whether it's a school or individually. Two, what supports your students and staff. Questions around onboarding, usage, the user journey, those kind of things. And then what truly builds value in a partnership over time, because these platforms are not just vendors, they are relationships, they are long-term relationships, and these relationships have to be nurtured. And so what is it that you can look for, or how can you deepen your partnerships with your partners? For this, I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists today. So we have Shelly, who is the regional sales manager at Maia Learning. Shelly is a bit of a legend. She's worked with so many different platforms and companies, and she has a really, really strong understanding of the different options that exist out there. And Shelley also interestingly lives in Asia, and she understands the local context very, very, very well. So welcome, Shelley. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today with us. We then have Stanley with us. Stanley is the co-founder and COO of Cialfo. Cialfo does not need an introduction in the Indian context at all. Cialfo is one of the leading platforms as well for guidance, but also for guidance counselors. It's often referred to as the right-hand tool for many, many schools. And we've seen them make a lot of important strides that have been industry defining in the last few years. So welcome, Stanley. Welcome to this conversation. And then we have Prateek Bhargava, who is the CEO of Mindler. Mindler is an Indian company that solves the fundamental challenges of guidance and the lack of workshops or any sort of interventions or counselor interventions within high schools. But it's not, the Mindler is not just known for their incredible guidance workshops. They're also known very, very much for their assessments, their psychometric assessments, and they offer a whole plethora of virtual internships and other profile building opportunities. So welcome, Prateek. Welcome to this conversation. And last but not the least is Martin. Martin is the head of customer success at BridgeU. BridgeU has seen an uptake in adoption in the subcontinent, especially in India in the last couple of years. And there's been a lot of conversation around BridgeU. And Martin, we really, really want to know more about BridgeU, because I think out of all these platforms, that's the one platform that's the newest to our part of the world, or at least for many of us. And we've heard incredible things about BridgeU as well. So we'd love to know more. So welcome all of you to this conversation. And without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. All right. So let's begin with a big picture view. And I'm going to do, I think for a lot of these round robin questions, I'm going to start with, say, Shelley, and then Shelley, you can pass it on. You can just take any one of the four panelists' names so they can answer the question. And then, we sort of pass it on that order. Okay, so let's begin with the big picture view. I'd like to invite you to reflect briefly for 2 minutes approximately on this question. What does the current landscape of tech adoption in schools across South Asia look like to you for college guidance? And what's that one myth that you think schools are still holding on to when it comes to tech in the space? So if we can start with you, Shelley, what's the current landscape according to you, and what's the one myth that schools are still holding to tech in guidance?
Yeah, thanks, Bhakti, for the question. I think just looking at schools across South Asia, and I'm sure everyone here can probably agree, but the landscape is still quite mixed. Obviously, we have some schools, especially in larger tier one cities, that are moving quite quickly, have adopted platforms in tech, probably been using them for the past decade, and using everything from, career exploration tools, application and communication tools, tools that they use with universities. But I think a lot of other schools, especially if you're in smaller towns, you might have limited resources. Maybe you don't even have a counseling team at your school. It's still early days for a lot of those schools. But I would think the pace is picking up. I think most, especially after the academic adoption was increased a lot after the pandemic, and now it really is quite commonplace to see tech in schools, no matter where your school is located. As far as a myth or misconception, I think for me, it is like a lot of the questions that I get are really that bringing technology means that we are replacing kind of human touch with guidance, right? But it's really kind of the opposite. I think if you have good tech, it actually gives your counselors more time to do what they're best at. So having meaningful conversations with students, maybe organizing or streamlining their work, but not actually replacing the work, just getting rid of kind of the admin work that they spend a lot of time on. And then another one just quickly is probably that tech is a huge investment, or an all or nothing shift. I think even really small steps. So even if you're not going to use an entire platform, but need something to help with a certain aspect, you can do that quite easily, and it's quite simple to do. So it doesn't have to be a huge time investment or financial investment to use tech. But that's what I would say. I will pass it on to Martin.
Thanks, Shelley. I think you, Shelley, you may have just stole my entire answer unknowingly. But firstly, afternoon, everybody. Good morning, everybody. It's definitely a pleasure to be here with so many educators and counsellors that make or play a crucial role in shaping students' futures. Obviously, as mentioned, I'm representing BridgeU. We, as a tech platform, we've seen kind of encouraging momentum post-pandemic in South Asia. We're currently working with around 110 schools in the region. But we do see the pace of adoption being probably uneven is the best way to say it. It is quickening, probably driven by like rising parent expectations, competitive university landscape, and the students' need for a more personalized pathway. I think maybe just to add to what Shelley has mentioned previously is that one of the most persistent myths that we see is around the fact that this technology will remove the counselor's personal touch. And actually, that really is the opposite of what these platforms are there and designed to do. It's really the BridgeU or any of these platforms are really designed to amplify what the counselor brings to the students. And one thing that we've seen at BridgeU is that the use of platforms like this and the ability to make data-driven decisions allow counsellors to go from being reactive to more strategic in the way that they work with students. They can like map out pathways better, spot gaps earlier, And it goes from them not supporting just the high flyers within their classes, but every student in the room. So I think that's the common myth, along with what Shelley said about tech being an investment as well. That's my answer, and I will hand over to Stanley.
Can you hear us, Stanley?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah, good.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. All right, great. Sorry. So yeah. Thanks so much, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, some of you, for welcoming us. So for us at Cialfo, I think we have been in this particular side of the market for a long period of time. As Atik would have shared, we are one of the predominant provider in India itself. So working with the local markets, we have seen many, especially on the diversity of destinations that students are interested in. In the past, when Navians dominated the market, back in the old days, I think US was the main and number one destination. And I think all of us would, empathize with this and have seen how all the shift in geopolitical relationships have basically moved a lot of people's interest into local regions, if not other destinations, right, which are traditionally not as predominant. And what that means would be that it's a challenge for counselors, for you, where you no longer you might be spending a lot of time understanding one particular destination. Now it's multiple destination, and how do you actually make sure that you can serve your student needs, right? And so, and I think in terms of the evolution of the myth, right, that we all talked about technology, how it support. I think going one first step further, I think a lot of counselors were worried that AI will replace counselors' jobs. And I would want to put it out there that it is hard for AI to replace your job because of the amount of relationship, amount of time that you spend with each single student, and being able to understand your student and how to help them. So again, I think AI can provide recommendations, they can provide some directions, but what students really need is the trust and the relationship that you will build with them, right? And so rather than spending time in learning and getting facts and data, focusing on the students and making sure that you have this enriched experience and relationship with your kids, and most importantly, the recommendation that you give to them is trustworthy. A machine can give data, but if they don't have the relationship, right? So I think that's where you can really put in your very best and make sure that students gets the best outcome.
All right, three speakers down, all have said consistently AI or tech is not replacing human beings.
No.
All right, I think that's loud and clear. So let's bust and put that myth aside once and for all. And I agree. I think it's not just AI. Now it's AI, but I think 10 years ago when I was working in a company that also offered a platform for, guidance, I remember schools back then saying that it's going to either replace counselors or going to be very hard to implement, because it's learned behavior. Pratik, I'd love to hear from you because your platform, your opening remarks, I'm expecting to be a little bit different because your platform is actually a great hybrid of human intervention and technology. Tell us what you think.
So, firstly, thanks for having me here. Just to give a first point around the landscape bit, right? And I'll focus more on an Indian context, given our experience here. So, India, if you look at it, the penetration rate of career counseling in a school is about 0.5%, which means 99.5% schools in our country do not have anything regarding counseling. Forget about a platform or a technology. In fact, the adoption rate is massive. It's really fast, and surprisingly, it's really fast in government schools and institutions because every state government is trying to do something. They may not be going the ideal tech route and all, but at least they're getting to a stage where they want information available. So that's happening, right? As of date, there are about 16 states which have state tenders and everything that is on where they're trying to do something or the other. So the adoption is extremely fast. And I think the major reason behind this has happened during the last 5 years, driven by first COVID, your UGC reforms came in, the CUET exam came in. All of this led to one direction where the North Star metric for a school moved from marks, right? The core thing which a parent is looking at a school is I will get great marks. That myth is gone that, okay, you get a 99, you studied at top school. Doesn't work like that anymore. So the next best thing which you will look at is where is my kid going to go after school, right? So alumni, the quality of diversity of careers, rather the stuff where they are going, the colleges is the root thing that every school is not going to look at. And that is where if you look at all progressive schools in the country, they'll all have all the top platforms with them. They will be focusing on alumni and all. So that is one with the landscape. On the myth side, I'll actually break down this bit of AI and counselors, right? That one debate. It's like when we actually work with counselors, we tell them that there are certain parts of your job which is actually you're not supposed to do and can be done better by AI, right? So it's really not about, ideally, if I was a counselor, I would want that job to be automated. For example, which is that exam for which college, which is the date for which, I should not as a human being remember that. My core skill is what I should be focusing on is how do I engage with a child, how do I solve their problems, how do I listen to them, which I think AI may never, or you should never say that, but at least it's, I think that's something which nobody's even attempting to imitate, right? That, okay, can you listen to a student's problem and give a solution? It's more about AI can give you answers to key points, key issues. We have all used it in various capacities, but I think there are certain areas where tech plays a much better role. So, and in certain schools, when I'm talking about the and I'll also classify schools into two categories. One is wherein there's a lot of focus on overseas education, right? So the kind of work counselors are doing is very different versus a normal school wherein, let's say, 99% of the kids are studying in India. The role of counselors are very different. It is more focused on events. It's more focused because they can't individually interact with all thousands and thousands of kids, right? There again, tech plays a huge role, and I don't really see them being threatened by AI in a big way. And if they are, they shouldn't be. Absolutely not.
Thanks for that, Pratik. Some very interesting facts. I think the most jarring part of this was the first line of your comment, which was the 0.5% penetration, but high adoption rates. But that 0.5 is very, very jarring. I think that also kind of explains why we have the whole ecosystem of guidance tech companies in Asia are chasing the same 500 schools, maybe 700 in India specifically. Okay, let's double click a little bit on geography for a minute, right? Stanley, you've scaled across continents as Cialfo, and similar question for Shelley. I'm going to ask you a follow up for this as well. Stanley, how do you at Cialfo adapt to different cultural approaches to college counseling? Because college counseling is not a nutshell, right? It's there's psychometric assessments, there's career exploration, there is test prep, college search, college applications, visas. There's a whole spectrum, right? And there's a cultural context to every single workflow in the spectrum. So you've scaled across continents. How do you adapt to different cultural approaches to college counseling, especially in high stakes and test driven regions like, say, India or China? And how do you strike a balance between the standardization and local customization?
Thanks, Bhaktik, for the question. So, yeah, precisely. So Cialfo, though we serve, schools and counselors in 105 countries, I would want to highlight that majority of them is in Asia. So China, India, Southeast Asia, right? And even then, it's extremely diverse. I come to India, like almost once every 2-3 months. China once a quarter, Southeast Asia once a quarter. So you can imagine my travel schedule. But having said that, what I've personally observed is that the counselors and the communities in different parts of the world has its distinctive culture and differences. Even within India, the Bangalore counselors are very different from the Mumbai counselors, very different from the Delhi counselors. How they work with their parents, how they, what is important to them, how the community collaborate itself is very different, right? So for us, firstly, recognizing that difference, right? And then secondly, so how do we then shape the platform that allows it to customize to different needs, different board exams, you have CBSE, then you have the IB schools, and you have A-level schools, right? How do you have a single platform that allows the data to be shared through, for example, the scattergraphs? How do you allow the customers to change the scale such that it is still user-friendly, it's still usable? How do you customize your search, in universities, in course search, such that you can allow for that? So being able to be aware of all these differences and building it into the system is really, really important. And because Cialfo, we have been working with so many schools in so many different countries and regions, that's something that we have spent a lot of time building over time, right? And then another thing to focus on would be, again, I was mentioning, right, how different counselors work with parents, how important they are as part of picture itself is very, very different school to school, right? And so how do you allow different permissions? Do you allow parents to even see anything? Some schools, when we work with the counselors like, parents, please don't be involved. Some are like, I want them to be totally involved. And some would be like, I want them to be involved, but only as a view, but not to edit, right? The shortlist. So there are different, approaches that you need to be able to cater to, and that's something that we care all about. And ultimately, understanding all these differences and building it into the onboarding process, right? Really being able to appreciate what the counseling practice each different counselors wants to do in each different office, and building it into the system configurations is something that Cialfo really expertise in, right? So there are other platforms out there where they are very strong in a certain destination, but Cialfo, I would assure everyone that we have a data team in India that is almost 15 people strong that draws data from every single places, and we also build tech tools to do that. I would recognize that a lot of our platform can do better in providing Indian university information, so we have to some extent that information. But I would comment that platforms in India like Pratik and other platforms may have more enriched information on that. So plugged in for Pratik, right? But that's really important because we observe that a lot of Indian counselors, you have like 20-30% students applying overseas, and then remaining applying to the Indian universities, right? So how do you collaborate with each other to make sure that you have enriched information? That's something really, really important. Yeah.
I have a very rehearsed next question, but Stanley, what you just said also made me think of something else, which is and then Shelley, maybe I want you to weigh in on this one, which is, and all of you actually, is it a wise choice for a school to use a combination of platforms? Because like you said, certain platforms are better with their information and research and even university connections for that matter for certain parts of the world. How does a counselor who has, say, 30% or 40% of their students studying abroad, but 60% studying in India, which is literally almost every second school, that's sort of the statistic closely, how do they just go in for one platform and say, okay, this one size fits all? Or is there, like, what is your view? Should there be a combination? Shelley, will start with you, and then Martin, I'd love to hear your views.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, thanks, Bhakti, for that question. It's quite interesting, I think, if you think about how schools are using platforms, and I think not just looking at where the students are going, and considering, oh, do I use this platform for my students that are going to the US or for these students that are staying in India, but actually the different components of the career and college readiness journey, right? I would say the kind of detriment of using multiple platforms would be able to keep your data in one place, right? If you want to pull kind of comprehensive reporting on your students, if you want them to follow the same process. So for a counselor, using multiple platforms can be harder on them, just in the fact that you're doing different processes, you're learning different systems, and you have to know where everything is. But there are some benefits to that as well. So I know some schools that use, maybe they use Mindler for their career information, or they use a different platform for their support with the counselors and more training for the counselors, and then a system for their university applications. And it could be that different people are actually doing different parts of the process. I think the most important thing to really think about when choosing a platform is how does the platform meet your needs and meet your process as a school, instead of thinking, how can I fit my school's process into the process that this platform has? And if using one platform meets those needs for you, that's great. And if you need to use two and you feel like comfortable adopting multiple platforms to do different things and learning those platforms, I mean, I think that's really up to the school to make that kind of decision. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Fair, absolutely. All right. I'm going to now take my rehearsed question, which now I'm not going to ask you, Shelley. Well, you're free to answer it. But Martin, I'll come to you with this. Especially from the perspective of the student counselor ratio, right? Most counselors have very, very heavy caseloads and they have limited tech support. So does BridgeU offer any specific workflow optimizations to reduce administrative fatigue and to free up, their time? I'm not just talking about tools, I'm talking about actual like workflows, administrative workflows. And then I'd love to hear from, of course, all of you on this, if you would like to talk a little bit about your platform and how it helps with reducing administrative fatigue, not just for school counselors, but for counselors generally, even independent counselors who are using your platform. Yeah, go for it, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, yes is the simple answer, and I think it maybe comes back to what Shelley was talking about there, which is one of the maybe the administrative headaches that any of the platforms relieve is kind of having data stored in one place that's easily accessible and can be read in multiple different contexts as well. And within that, I know we're maybe not speaking about tools specifically, but if we were to take a look at something like assessments within, say, any of the platforms, but BridgeU specifically, being able to set students up with the ability to take assessments within one platform and allow the action to be student-led. Hopefully reduces the administrative workload and also then being able to review those results and en masse to analyze that data en masse is hopefully an administrative workload that is removed from the counsellor that then frees them up to do other things. And that kind of idea applies across the platform in terms of the various different stages of the exploration journey that a student might be in. But I think at the core, it comes down to making sure that data is stored in one place. And that's the greatest administrative ease that the platforms have, in my opinion, for counsellors.
Thanks, Martin. And just as a quick follow-up, especially from the perspective of onboarding, right? Because there's a lot of learning curves when it comes to new platforms being adopted in schools. What is the kind of training, onboarding support and I'd love to hear that from each one of you. A, what is the kind of support that you provide? And B, I'd love to hear your thoughts on counselor training programs and how they fit into the scheme of things from a guidance tech perspective, if at all. So Martin, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, no worries. So our onboarding program is roughly, but we aim to have people or schools onboarded onto the platform within 45 days. And the support that the school will get is a dedicated client partner that works with that school. And it's kind of a staged process that we'll go through with the school, where we'll firstly have an introductory call where we'll understand the needs specifically of that school and what success would look like in terms of the platform for that school. And then past that, we help with both uploading students into the platform and giving them specific guidance and training for both the advisors on how to use the BridgeU platform, and then secondly, launching with students as well. So we offer virtual launches that we have with classes of students where we launch the BridgeU platform into that class or grade. Post that, or maybe along with that, is we also have a bunch of resources. So we have a BridgeU community that counsellors can join to connect with other counsellors from across the world, as well as a number of different lesson plans that they can use that are BridgeU, that incorporate the BridgeU platform, but cover a wide curriculum. And then post that onboarding, the school will receive a client partner that they work with then continuously throughout their journey with BridgeU, that they can meet and use as a reference point for any issues or any pointers that they might need with BridgeU.
Thanks, Martin. And just a question to all of you, Prateek, Shelley, Stanley, are your onboarding processes similar, or is there something that's specifically different about the way you approach training counselors when they start using your platform? Yeah, Prateek, go ahead.
Yeah, so I will say almost 99% similar is the same process of onboarding. However, one additional thing which we try and do is that because most of the schools that, except for those 1,000-odd schools in India and across some of the international schools that we work with, most schools do not have counselors, right? So majority of the clients that we actually work with, we are actually initiating counseling setups. So what a school typically gives you at the start is a coordinator with whom you become a SPOC, you have a team and you do the ops bit. But what we have successfully been doing, and it has worked really well, is onboard almost all high school teachers into a certification route, which we take them through. So we take them through a level 1 program, which is just 2 days investment, but we take all the teachers, tell them to invest one weekend, Saturday, Sunday, 8 hours each, record it. You can leverage it later. It just creates awareness about what we are doing, because the biggest clash or biggest challenge that comes to career counseling, particularly when you have services involved, is school teachers who always feel academics is more important. So the moment you get their buy-in, the world is changing. The way you are guiding kids is great, you're helping them, but the route to admissions, everything has changed. So if you get their buy-in, that's great. So almost 60-70% of those teachers join in, which is a huge hit. And then the second step is from those where we see the most enthusiastic response, we recommend to the school, why don't you invest in getting them through our full certification 6-month long program, wherein they can double up as in-house school counselors and maybe even transition to that role over a period of time. And then some top chains we have seen, like the entire school counseling system has eventually got framed by this. So that's the additional thing which we have done, which helps us in stickiness because of the certification program over and above the onboarding.
So you're focusing on creating a culture of counseling beyond just the counselor and saying, how can we evangelize counseling through every teacher and not just that one counselor? That's a very interesting approach. And I think your segment is also slightly different from some of the others here, where you're literally starting off the practice of counseling in many schools. And I think that need for the human touch and just having that in-person intervention is something that Mindler brings to the table. Thank you for that, Prateek. And Shelley, I'd love to hear from you. With Maia literally, across the globe, how do you, once again, navigate the process of onboarding and teacher training to adopt your platform?
Yeah, I think, like Prateek said, it's almost 99% similar to what Martin's saying. We have an onboarding team that helps you, and then it's really up to the speed of the counselor, right, to decide how fast they want to implement the program, how tech savvy they are, etc. I would say there's a couple differences that we have at Maia Learning, and one is that we are a fully remote company. So we don't have kind of an office base of people, and the reason I think why that's important is because then we have, we meet the schools where they are, right? We have somebody in Australia, somebody in Japan, a Mandarin speaker in Taiwan, people in South Asia. And so they really understand kind of the cultural context of those schools, like we were speaking about earlier, and can not only help them implement a platform, but understand how does that platform fit in with my needs. And then it also helps if that implementation person is not on the clock at that time and you're doing, you want to do something at midnight your time, but your person has gone to sleep. We have somebody to answer that somewhere in the world, even if it's late at night. The other thing that we do is really in-person events. So we meet schools quite frequently in person. We do trainings with them. We do student and parent trainings as well for schools if they're not feeling comfortable with that. And we are doing counselor tours as well. So we're taking counselors together to meet with universities, which is, I think, in the broader scheme of things, really helps them connect with other counselors within the Maia network. And then they all kind of learn from each other as well.
That's beautiful. I was just thinking about um, how many of us are doing very, very similar things, but there's still so much space for every single one of us to coexist and thrive because there are so many schools and there are so many universities and there are so many diverse set of student needs. Stanley, I really want to understand from you about student outcomes. I think one of the most robust reports I have seen, and I've seen some of your reports, school reports, right? I think they're really exciting, and I'd love to understand that from whoever wants to chime in. But Stanley, we'll go with you first. How do you sort of, at the end of the year, with everything said and done, all the university interactions and all the college platform exploration, onboarding, all of this, what does it look like when it comes to that one document that tells a school or a counselor, an independent counselor who's adopted your platform? What does it tell them at the end of the year, and how does one look at it? So what is the outcome that you track?
Thanks, Bhakti. I think before that, I want to chime in on onboarding a little bit. So I think that Cialfo does also do a little bit different stuff. Like, so one key thing is that I think a lot of companies often will talk about hours or if not days in terms of responding to clients. Cialfo responds in 2 minutes, right? Like drop in a chat request, we respond in 2 minutes. I think not many people can say that they do that and 24/7. So that's something that we have done for our clients. Second thing is that we did launch the counseling excellence program with U Chicago this year. And then if you are my LinkedIn friend or connection, you would see that I literally just came back from a UK trip, bringing a few counselors in your community in Bangalore and Delhi to the UK universities, in Brunel, in QMUL, in Exeter, all the great universities, institutions, right? So I just want to quote some of those things. So regarding the student journey, Batik, I think Cialfo do have really studied the whole student journey that the students might go through from grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we understand that it is not a single point in time where they have to do every single thing. A lot of your students, as you work with them, they will come to you or have the impression that they need to know everything from tomorrow, but that's not realistic, right? So we actually compartmentalize these different parts of the journey and help created this gamified process. We call it University Quest, UniQuest, and essentially help them to understand at different parts of the journey, you should focus on different things, right? And that drives engagement and usage of the platform. And I would like to put it out there that one of my engineers have told me that any data that exists on Cialfo can be reported. So Cialfo has a very robust reporting dashboard that we have been building over time, and we can actually present that to your student, your leaders, your school leaders to use, and this data is actually live. They don't have to wait for you to download a report. They can access it themselves. Some of these reports are visual, and so we give recommendation on how a school and a counselor can better use certain parts of the platform to get even greater student engagement. So all this are really, really cool stuff that we develop. We talk about counselor workflow just now. Cialfo actually built a special dashboard plug that informs counselor certain highlights or things they have to take care of. So for example, if you have sent a document and it's near, or you're supposed to send a document near a deadline, who can remember which student is applying to which school and which deadline is upcoming, right? And you expect that you must click to a certain page before you can find that information. So Cialfo actually developed a plugin that highlights that to you. So from when you first log in, you can actually see that there's a warning that there's something that you should actually act on, and that reduces risk, right? So all this data are really important to help your school and your school leadership appreciate the quality of counseling that you provide to your students.
Thanks, Stanley. And before I move into, I'm very sensitive of the time. We have about 15 minutes, and I want to pack in the last comments as well as questions from the audiences. So please feel free to type in your questions on the chat. And while I'm going to just go around the room and get my last comments, but anyone else wants to weigh in on the way you present outcomes to not just and let's also let's also look at the room and understand that they're not just school counselors but independent counselors as well right now, who are very much attending the session, wanting to understand what is in it for them. So let's keep schools aside for a second. And I'm just going to throw this question open to all of you and say, if an independent counselor wants to adopt your platform, your technology, what can they look forward to? And I'm going to throw the floor open. Whoever wants to go first, just go ahead and chime in, and the next person can come in. Yeah, there's questions about independent counselors being able to use your platform. So anybody else wants to go? Anybody wants to go first? Martin?
Yeah, I can. I mean, they can look forward to not paying anything with BridgeU, which is probably a good thing. BridgeU is a free platform. Maybe just to add some context, important context, that BridgeU is a platform. So yeah, that, I suppose from our perspective, that will be one of the things that an independent counsellor could look forward to.
Okay, that's an amazing, amazing reason to explore BridgeU. Martin, please feel free to put in your email ID on the chat in case, or any other email ID that an independent counselor can write to if they wish to explore your platform. Anyone else would like to chime in here? Prateek, Stanley, Shelley.
Yeah, maybe I'll just quickly chime in. Yeah, so Cialfo does have a platform version that does not have document sending because that's only for schools. That's available to IECs. I think something to look forward to that you're mentioning. So we are looking at AI note-taking feature. So, and this is also usable to schools, counselors. So imagine that you don't have to actually take notes when you have a meeting with students. Just click record, it automatically transcribes the entire conversation and give you the summary, right? So you can focus your meetings and your relationship with your students. Yeah.
Thanks, Stanley.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Prateek. No, take it.
Okay, so all I was saying is for ICs, in fact, we're right now working with more ICs than schools across the entire spectrum. The usage for an IC for the Mindler platform is largely for those ICs who want to set up their career guidance practice, provide career guidance tools and solutions to kids, look at discovery of colleges, get customized report, get all these, use Orion, which is one of our chatbots, all of that. That is what happens on our platform. But yeah, if somebody wants to look at managing the student end-to-end journey for college applications abroad, then obviously the three alternative platforms would be a much better fit. We don't do that. We largely help counselors get ready to reach that stage. And if there are certain students who are looking at international admissions, they could use that. But ours is more focused on getting them to that journey till grade 12th.
Thanks, Prateek. And then I think for Maia Learning, we do have a separate platform called Guided Path. I put the link in the chat itself so you guys can look at that. That's specifically created for IEC, similar to what Stanley said. It wouldn't have the application sending parts, but it would have other components of Maia Learning. And as far as things I think that you could look forward to in the platform is we have just introduced kind of a plethora of career and university guidance AI tools. That are really globally focused. So no matter where your students might be going as an independent consultant, whether they're staying in India or looking at different locations globally, you would be able to use those kind of global tools to help understand kind of what programs are available for your student based on things like the curriculum that they're studying, where they like to focus, and their career pathway as well.
Thank you, Shelley. And I'm going to now come at you all with my final question. I'd love to hear your final thoughts on the fact that there are several platforms, too many features, and a few promises. If you had to give one honest piece of advice to a counselor who's watching this, not just right now, but who's going to watch the recording as well, a counselor, administrator, school leader, or an independent counselor who's really making an investment for their business, they're feeling overwhelmed. What are the top 2 factors, or maybe more? What are the top factors that they should consider while choosing or assessing what platform is the right fit for them. Would love to start with you, Martin, and then Stanley, and then Pratik and Shelley. You shall have the last word.
Yeah, maybe just as a side comment, maybe it's down to all of us to get together to make sure that we aren't flooding the market with a lot of mixed messages and dazzling demos. Yeah, maybe that's a side piece for us to go on and talk about. But I think really, and I think this was mentioned previously by Shelley, it's I think the top factor to consider is really the alignment with your counselling philosophy and process. It's really asking yourself whether the platform supports a kind of guidance that you believe in. And it's not necessarily asking you to change how you counsel, but it's more that it's helping you to do it efficiently and more impactfully, rather than asking you to wholesale change the way that you approach this process. It's helping you to amplify what you already do within the school. And I would say that that would be the number one factor that I would prioritize.
Thanks, Martin. Firstly, thanks, Pratik, for inviting us to this panel. It's always we're always thankful for being in this community. I think one key thing is that although on the internet you might read that Cialfo is a Singapore HQ company, fun fact, we have more people in India than in Singapore. So I want to highlight that, although we are Singapore HQ, we have a lot more people in India, specifically Delhi, and we do really care about the community aspect. I think it will be hard for us to disagree about what you should look out for, but how much do we actually invest in the local community, understanding the different languages and diversity of India itself, right? Like I was mentioning, how Delhi counsellor is so different from a Bangalore counsellor versus Mumbai, how the streets are different, the food is different, and appreciating and really immersing yourself in that culture and working with you hand in hand, to make sure your students are well served. So how can you feel confident that the technology is not just a technology, but a company, a community that is behind you, right? That you trust, that you can work with. I think that's really, really, really important. Yeah. Pratik?
Yeah. So I think I'll just list two factors. I think one is a very practical grade as in the classes in which the students you are dealing with. If you are looking at I think career exploration, discovery, which is more important at the earlier stages. I think different alternative platforms are there. At a slightly higher stage, at grade 11, 12, it's largely college admission, placements, etc. You need something else. That is one clear need. So if you look at majority of the schools who use Mindler and maybe also an international application focused platform, a lot of them do that because at the grade 12th level, they have a completely different requirement. Second is the need of the students. If you have a high majority, and I'm thinking of a school counselor, if I have a large number of students who are going abroad, then my rationale for choosing a platform changes completely versus where my kids are wanting to study. So I think those two factors, the stage of the child that I'm dealing with and the requirements.
Thanks, Pratik, and thanks, Bhakti, for hosting this session. I think it's been really good. I would agree with most of the things that people have said, right? Like, make sure that the platform fits your need as a school and you're not changing your processes to fit a platform, right? Every school is very different. So I think, at Maia Learning, we would never say every school should be using Maia Learning, right? Depending on your needs and what the school is looking at, your student body, there might be a better platform out there for you, and that's okay. So don't just listen to the school that's you're close friends with, that's next door, because their needs might be quite different from the needs that your school is at. And then I would say the thing that I would always consider is how are the platforms using your student data. Student data is very kind of important now. A lot of people will pay a lot of money to access student data. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our students safe and our community safe. So I would definitely emphasize on finding that out. It's not something that will come up a lot in a demo, but it's an important, I think, aspect of student security.
Absolutely. And I think almost a checklist of sorts, which is a good takeaway for any counselor or a school or independent to sort of ask the kind of questions that they need to assess the right fit is probably going to be the outcome of this session. We're going to create that as a resource. We're going to circulate it to all of you as speakers to see if you have any inputs, because there are a set of questions and some introspection that I think an institution, whether it's a school or a company of an independent counselor, needs to ask themselves. But the stakes are specifically high when it comes to schools, because I'm just going to say this, right? I think most companies or many companies in the space are not interested in tarnishing their reputations for no reason. But what ends up happening is when you have a school adopt a platform without the right due diligence and not understanding exactly what they're getting into, there can be chances when they really go out there and talk about companies specifically without, and you know, it's not really the company's fault entirely either. I just feel like whether it's Maia Learning, BridgeU, Cialfo, Mindler, or any other platform, it is you as schools who need to ask the right questions, and then you'll get those answers, right? You can't expect that if you've not done your due diligence, everything's going to be given to you on a platter. So schools, I really request all of you to just kind of do your due diligence, have a checklist of questions that you want to ask, and be very thorough with it. Don't just get into things blindly because XYZ school or your competition school is buying a certain platform. That's not how it works. It leads to a disaster. I think, Amrita, you have a question or you had a comment. Amrita, why don't you just unmute yourself? Go for it.
Hey, good to see all of you. I think I'm just curious to. I know when I was back in school, there wasn't much choice of a platform, but now I've seen counseling from when the platform started coming in, and also now, so the landscape is kind of changed, is evolved, right? And it's become more dense. There are more conversations, and every school is asking this question: should I not? And when? So is it dependent on the number of students? And that's when I start. Does it depend on whether I should take a platform when I have someone who's trained who can use the platform, etc. So what are the 3 or 4 considerations that a school, like how can a school assess when they are ready for a platform? What should be their top sort of, what should be the conversation around there, and what should be, that. I think that was one of my questions. And the other is I'm very curious to see if there are any of you could speak about 1 or 2 changes, significant changes on the platform in the last 2 years with all the advent of AI, etc., which has sort of upped the game and sort of, and I when I say up the game, I'm really talking about ease in adoption, because I think when I was in school, the challenge, I came from a school that was well resourced, so my challenge wasn't the budget or the money to spend. My challenge was getting the kids on the platform. And I just want to hear from all of you, is that still a challenge? And what has been done in the last 2 years to sort of, from a platform point of view?
Yeah, I can go if no one else is talking. I would say I just think I don't know if there's a right time necessarily to use a platform or implement a platform. I think really when we think about tech, we should think about, is it serving our people in process and is it serving our people and our process, right? So the risk isn't like when is the right time to use technology, but how are we going to implement the technology in the best way for our school? So what that really means is, before you implement a platform, really have a clear plan of how it's going to be implemented. Make sure that you are getting stakeholder buy-in. So talking to your leadership teams, talking to your teachers, and making sure that everyone is kind of on the same page before you implement a platform. Because it's not necessarily that, you're going to start using it too early, but maybe that you start using it without buy-in from the school, and then that's generally what causes a platform to fail. There's no one there supporting you to help the students, to integrate with parents. And I think that, to me, would be my biggest piece of advice around when a school should implement it. They should implement when they feel ready with a plan on how they're going to use technology at the school. I don't know if anyone.
Yeah,
I don't.
I would chime in that, Amrita. I think I think actual implementation might be different from starting a conversation. Because like some of us here, we might be actually quite experienced with helping you talk to your school leadership about why the platform is actually important. Because what is important to school leadership is sometimes different from how you feel, right? As a counselor, it's important to you. But we have the experience talking to school leadership, helping them understand what they should look out for and how this can come hand to hand. For school leadership, if a new school, they are probably worried about recruitment of new students, right? But if you don't have good data supporting students, you don't have good data of where the students are going, how do you show to parents confidently, right, that you can support your students well and that you as a school produces good outcomes? So I think that is something that a platform can help you do. And I often want to help school leadership understand that it's not only about the platform, it's about the strategy. It's about Pratik mentioned also giving them training, supporting them through the onboarding with parents, with students, and all that, right? So we can be part of the conversation essentially. You don't have to start talking to us when you have the money. That's what I'm saying. We care more about when you have a need and how we can help you meet the need. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another point to add, and I agree with what Shelley and Stanley have said, is that obviously with BridgeU being free, we work with quite a mix of variety of like maturity of counselling departments too, and there is no real right time specifically to adopt a platform. And we work with certain schools in emerging countries where they may not have a dedicated counselling team. And one of the benefits of having conversations with any of the platforms is that it may spark a conversation within the school, within school leadership, that drives that conversation around the department of counselling team forward. And as Stanley mentioned, all of our platforms have people within that work within our companies that are very well versed in supporting schools through that journey and implementation, not just of the platform, but more holistically of a counselling curriculum within the school as well.
Thanks, Martins. Thanks, Stanley. Pratik, would you have anything to add here?
So I'll address the other question which Amrita asked regarding the changes that have been made to the platform to adapt to the needs. Uh, I think the biggest change for us as an organization also in the ecosystem perspective that I've seen, given the scale that we try and manage and work with, was leveraging AI. We last year launched a bot called Orion AI bot, which is basically a chat buddy for the kids. And the stats are through the roof in terms of the usage and adoption. And very interestingly, it's the early graders, the 9th, 10th graders, who are the first to jump on to these kind of tools to actually just ask all. And you have to see the kind of questions that they are, right? There'll be stuff like, can I be a chef and a ethical hacker on the same lines? This is actual genuine stuff which they genuinely do not get to ask in a school, because maybe the counselor may not be there or they don't have the access, or if they want to go to a specialist like a Mindler or any other organization or a coach, they'll have to pay money, right? So getting a tool like that into that ecosystem, I've seen significant jump in terms of usage adoptions, particularly with the early kids. Later 11th 12th is more about college applications, essays and all of that stuff, whether India or abroad. But that's one major change I see happening also in a massive way, and a lot of schools adopting it, because it genuinely, and we had to work a lot in terms of curating that it has a very limited access. So whatever platform based, because in schools you have to ensure that it cannot go, or you cannot get answer to any question that is going on in your mind. It has to be restricted to the world of career education, blah blah blah. So we worked a lot on doing that and making that happen. But yeah, that has been one of the biggest changes, and I've seen significant adoption also happening on that front. Bhakti, you're on mute.
Of course, it had to happen once in the session. All right. I have a couple of questions of my own, but I'd love to understand from the audience here if anyone wants to ask a question. Neeraj, go ahead.
Yeah, hi folks. Very interesting to know the various perspectives. So I am myself into the edtech world, building something very similar to some of the offerings here. So my question is, what can the counselors or what can the schools look forward to? Like, what's the way ahead now? with especially the leaders who are talking about the various technology aspects. So very related to what Amrita asked. So how is the ease of use for students, for teachers, and for the leaders? So besides AI, like, of course, I think there is a lot of things to do with AI. But what other aspects are the platforms planning where I think life of a student or life of a counselor becomes better in the next couple of years?
So essentially, Neeraj is asking, would you like to unwrap anything that's under wraps from your respective platforms and tell us what's in the pipeline, what you guys coming up with, what can the space look forward to?
I think I'll give a shot at this question. I think a lot of us will probably be working towards the angle of how AI can be more contextualized into different use case. There will come a point in time in a world where instead of playing with different filters, they will be speaking to an AI bot, right? Intuitively answering certain questions like, I'm interested in this country, I'm this personality, what do you think? And the system will just tell the students, these are things you should consider, right? So again, these are recommendations, but made in a very more conversational and intuitive way. And what this will help counselors potentially do is that they might come to counselors with a prepared list that they have thought about a little bit more with the assistance of AI. So I don't want to say that AI will replace the thinking process, because that is dangerous, because if you don't teach a kid how to think, then you're failing them, but assisting them through the thinking process, right? And in a very conversational way. And sometimes in this generation of youth, this is a plus and minus point. Sometimes they are afraid to come and talk to you or come and talk to a human being, but they don't mind chatting with a bot. And first, getting some of these questions out of the way first, right? To feel that they're more prepared. And I think that's some things that a lot of platforms will probably be looking at, and how they implement it will be different. We envision a world even that a counselor can wake up and the system will tell the counselor, these are the top 3 things you should be doing. Because sometimes you have so many things in your mind, you go to sleep late at night because you were trying to rush through applications deadlines. But then what do you have to care about, right, when you wake up? So these are some things that we are trying to challenge and see how it can be contextualized to help counselors, help students make their life easier. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that, Stanley. I think Aparna from 10X School, Bangalore, has a question. She says, how robust are psychometric assessments on your platforms? So if you'd like to type in your responses, or if you'd like to say them right now, go for it.
Bhakti, I'll add just
go ahead, Pratik.
Yeah.
I think I was going to
Go
say, I
ahead,
think
Pratik.
between BridgeU, Cialfo, and Maia Learning, the psychometric assessments are very similar. So I think yours probably is the most robust of all of us. So
All right.
Thanks. So,
Go ahead, Pratik.
Neeraj, I would just want to add to the previous point that you asked, right? I think the future, when you asked about it's moving up towards the side of hybrid for sure, as it
Yeah.
is with every industry. And I'll narrate this one line which emerged in one of our town halls and team meetings, is that, and the topic was AI versus counselors, and same jargon, same discussion on with everybody. There's a very interesting thing that emerged, that AI cannot replace career counselors, but AI will replace career counselors who resist AI/technologies. So that is a very interesting take that a lot of people had, that eventually you will adopt it, and it is more to be used by at your end. In fact, when we work with ICs and all the tools, even before the new AI tools we launched towards students, we first give it to the counselors, right? Because they are the genuine people who can actually test and ask it out at scale with students. So that is very, very interesting. And yeah, with regards to assessments, that is definitely one of the core areas that we work on. And the core different philosophy is that we take an approach wherein we have built out an assessment platform which is multidimensional in nature, which factors in multiple factors, and it's not just strength or personality or interest based. Because the theory being that I might be really interested, my interest towards a particular career might be there, but my aptitude may not support it, or my personality may not support it. So that is where the multi-dimensional factor that we have built in India, now taking to various parts of the world and validating it, doing the cultural norming, etc. But that's one area which differentiates at least Mindler's platform with any other that you might find in the industry.
Thanks, Prateek. I think there's another question which please feel free to respond to on chat. Kanchan asks, with students sharing increasingly sensitive data, academic and personal, on your platforms, what safeguards are in place to ensure privacy, ethical data use, and compliance with international data protection laws? Also, not to forget DPDP that's been introduced in India. That's a big one. It's going to be implemented in a very, very big way, very, very soon. So with that, one last question to all of you, and then I promise we're done. We talk a lot about schools being ready, right? Or overdue for adoption of tech or platforms and guidance. But let's flip the lens a little bit and let's ask ourselves, what does a school that shouldn't adopt such a platform yet look like? What is your view on what are the red flags that scream that hold off, this is not going to help you yet? If anybody would like to take that, what are the kind of schools that you think are not ready for this? This kind of tech adoption. Yeah, go for it, Martin.
I'm happy to go first. I think from my perspective, it would be schools that have very unclear objectives as to what they want out of a tech platform, or are just adopting it because they feel it's the right thing to do, rather than really getting deep on exactly what that means for their school. And secondly, I think we've touched upon it, where there isn't buy-in across the school as well, is another key factor, where it is maybe some individual within the school that wants to take the platform on, and then they roll it out maybe, but there isn't buy-in anywhere else within the school. And what we have seen in those instances is that there may then be a change of counsellor within that school at some point in the future, and the detriment of that is that the buy-in that the school has had essentially is gone within an instant, and the detriment is to the students rather than the school at large. So those are the kind of key factors I would think, where that you may need to just think more deeply before choosing to go ahead.
Thank you, Martin. Yep, Shelley, Stanley, Prateek, if anyone wants to chime in.
I second what Martin said.
Awesome. All right. BridgeU, Cialfo, Mindler, and Maia. The 4 names that are so precious to me because this space is very, very close to my heart. I follow the work that you do. If there's one thing that you think the industry needs to do more to support your access, your outreach, and your ability to reach schools and convey your messages better, what would that be? What can a community like the Outreach Collective do to help spread more awareness about stuff like this? You may choose to answer this now, or you may choose to send an email to me, but we're very happy to support your endeavors because we understand that tech is not optional, it's mainstream. It's like saying, do we choose to take a break while we work? I mean, it's as a no-brainer as that. You have to have tech in everything you do in life. It's non-negotiable. And I think schools need to snap out of their slumber, and independent counselors need to have more confidence that there is support available in platforms. Even if you're not a large school or an institution, you can still use a platform and make your life easier. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Stanley, Martin, Shelley, and Prateek for answering all the questions. We really appreciate it. They have left their email IDs on the chat, so you can feel free to reach out. If you've missed it, let us know. We'll put you in touch with the companies that you're interested in talking to. Thank you, TOC, and thank you all. Janvi, I already got a picture. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.